just to take an analog feed straight into your iPhone, record it.
Now?
Sounds really nice.
Pretty much
Now?
yeah.
Now? Now? Where am I? Yeah, I just wanted to get it out of my face.
Did we ever? Yes, we did. Okay.
So I know where you are this time. I won't be waiting for you. Remember last time we kept playing because I was watching the door? I didn't see you were right there. I let the love wash over me. 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 I let the truth 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 wash over me. I let the grace 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 wash over me.
All right, all right, all right. Thank you. Let the grace wash over me. Good morning, CSL Simi Valley. Welcome to a final version of Virch Without You Here. Next week, we come back live, in person, right here in the sanctuary. So happy to have that happen and to make that announcement for you. And so many things going on this week. Let's see. What is that thing that's supposed to happen this week that we're supposed to remember? That? You're thinking about the Super Bowl? You think that's why I might be dressed in blue for the Rams? Now, you know what? I feel so, you should have hopefully you have a very super day. I am so excited about this particular Super Bowl because I live in LA. This is my home. I was born in Cincinnati. I cannot lose today. It'll be a Joe-mazing, Ramalicious day. That's what I'm saying, a Joe-mazing, Ramalicious day. But that's not what I was actually thinking about. What I was thinking about is hearts and flowers.
Oh.
Yeah. Happy Valentine's Day to you and yours. I had an interesting Valentine's Day experience. I thought I would get some really special plants that Johanna likes and thought I'd go down to the flower mart to get them. And I'm driving down there and I get down there and it's just a nightmare. There's traffic, people are backed up, there's nowhere to park, it's just crazy. And I rode my motorcycle and I couldn't even find a place to park my motorcycle. And I'm thinking, this is so wild. I just want to get these flowers for these plants for, oh yeah, Valentine's Day. No wonder. That's like going to the toy store on Christmas morning, you know? It was a crazy thing to do. But that was my thought. At least I was a little ahead of the game. You know, it's also Valentine's Day. This is the birth month of W.B. Du Bois and also Abraham Lincoln, which is why February became Black History Month. And that's also on my mind today. Let's go back. That's on my mind today. And I've been putting quotes up this month to honor some of the folks within the community that just touched me. And this particular quote touched me a lot. And I'll tell you why in just a moment. Well, I'll just read it to you. It says, "The testimony of the individual is always fresh if he is able to make himself articulate to his fellows. Even when he is not, there is the persistent conviction that in some profound sense he himself knows and understands." There's always this persistent conviction that in some profound sense he himself knows and understands. Years ago, my mother created a wonderful painting. She called it The Passage. And I was reading more of this book from Howard Thurman, this philosopher, theologian, and civil rights activist and leader. He had an opportunity to go on a cruise along the coast of Africa. And as he looked out along the coast of Africa, something came over him. And as I was reading this passage, I thought I would share it with you. I'll let it speak for itself. But what it did for me is it brought my mother's painting called The Middle Passage alive. And maybe later this week I'll post it on Facebook so you can see it. But these are the reflections from Howard Thurman as he was cruising along, as he viewed the coast of Africa from his cabin. And it captures the sense of, I can't do it justice if I try. I'm just going to read this to you. It really touched me. I hope that you will catch the sensation that is offered here for you as we think about Black History Month and what it means to not just the community that it's named after, but also all of us as a nation as we go into the storytelling this month and the stories that we tell. Last week it was my story. This week it's our story. And this is a part of our story as the American story. It's also a part of our story as the journey of the Western civilization and what it did as it moved into this indigenous land that is called the Americas, and how it populated that land and with whom it populated that land. So he writes, "From my cabin window, I look out on the full moon, and the ghost of my forefathers arise and fall with the undulating waves. Across these same waters, how many years ago they came? What were the inchoate mutterings locked tight within the circle of their hearts? In the deep, heavy darkness of the foul-smelling hold of the ship, where they could not see the sky, nor hear the night noises, nor feel the warm compassion of the tribe, they held their breath against the agony. How does the human spirit accommodate itself to desolation? How did they? What tools of the spirit were in their hands with which to cut a path through the wilderness of their despair? If only death of the body would come to deliver the soul from dying. If some sacred taboo had been defiled and this extended terror was the consequence, there would be no panic in the paying. If some creature of the vast and pulsing jungle had snatched the life away, this would, even in its wildest fear, be floated by the familiarity of the daily hazard. If death had come, ushered into life by a terrible paroxysm of pain, all the assurance of the tribe would have carried the spirit home on the wings of precious ceremony and holy ritual. But this, nothing anywhere in all the myths, in all the stories, in all the ancient memory of the race had given hint of this torturous convulsion. There were no gods to hear, no magic spell of witch doctor to summon. Even one's companion in chains muttered his quivering misery in a tongue unknown and a sound unfamiliar. Oh, my fathers, What was it like to be stripped of all supports of life, save the beating of the heart, the ebb and flow of the fetid air in the lungs? In a strange moment, when you suddenly caught your breath, did some intimation from the future give to your spirits a hint of promise? In the darkness, did you hear the silent feet of your children beating a melody of freedom to words which you would never know? In a land in which your bones would be warmed again in the depths of the cold earth in which you sleep, unknown, unrealized, and alone. The thoughts of Howard Thurman as he floated in his own freedom and looked out on the coast of Africa and thought about the people that had been pulled from that land, thrown into these ships, traveled across an ocean, and enslaved for the rest of their lives. This is the core of why we celebrate Black History Month, why we acknowledge, I don't even want to say celebrate, why we acknowledge the contributions of Black Americans to this country, of enslaved people who came here against their will. This is from Howard Thurman's writings in The Inward Journey. The book escaped me for a minute. The Inward Journey, Viewing the Coast of Africa. I'll also post this on my Facebook page later for you to read, because it's just the story, if you ever want to have a feeling of what that experience was like. That's part of the story. That's part of what we're going to talk about today. Not that particular story, but our story, and how we can bring that story into our right sizing, and then what we do with it. What we do with our own journey here within the Center for Spiritual Living Simi Valley, how we bring our story to life each and every week. We have a mission and a vision that guides us in understanding our story and how we take it out into the world. And it says, and join me at home, say it along with me. It says, we're community, inclusive, loving, and authentic. We celebrate all paths to God in gratitude, empowering self and others. We serve compassionately through outreach, inspiration, and education. That's who we are. That's why we're here. And here's what we do. Take it away, John Newbell.
So join me in an opening treatment. Here now, there is and always has been one divine story. And each one hearing this expresses that one infinite story through their unique and individualized story. All of us contributing in our own unique way to the one divine story. And right here I declare that we have the power to create our story, the power to adjust our story, the power to resize our story, the power when our story no longer serves us to create a whole new story, power to ask how many stories are in the house of our mind. So today we begin to resize our own story to contribute to the harmony, to the one divine story, to honor the symbols, spaces, and places, and contribute to our story, and release those stories that no longer serve us. Grateful for every story now woven into the tapestry of life, I release my word into the law, and so it is.
Where you lead me, I will follow. needs my love today? Who needs my love today? Sweet Spirit.
And here's today's affirmation. I'll read it once, and then I'll invite you to read it with me. Our stories, sacred symbols, familiar spaces, and encouraging places remind me I am not alone as I step into the divine story. Together. Our stories, sacred symbols, familiar spaces, and encouraging places remind me I am not alone as I step into the divine story. My reading I chose today was from Byron Katie's book, Who Would You Be Without Your Story? Byron Katie is somebody who for almost 40 years has been helping people to resize their stories. And the passage I'm going to read is the actual last paragraph from this book. And the book consists of dialogues with Katie doing what she calls the work, which is a process of identifying and questioning. As we resize our story. The work is like this. You're walking through the desert, and it's a beautiful day. And you look down and you see a big, fat rattlesnake. And you're terrified of rattlesnakes. You jump back. Your heart is racing. Your pulse is beating. You're paralyzed with fear, sweat on your brow. Then the sun goes behind a cloud. And you look again. And it isn't a snake after all. It's a rope. Now I invite you to stand over that rope for 1,000 years and make yourself afraid of it again. You can't. This is self-realization. You have realized for yourself what is true. And you can never be afraid of that rope again. That's the power of questioning your mind. So what we've been dealing with this evening are apparent snakes. And I can tell you that in 20 years, I have never met a thought that is in reality a snake. They've all been ropes. Every single stressful thought I've ever encountered has been a rope. There's no exception to that. And I love that you've begun to find out for yourself. Thank you.
We are one. We are one. We are all one in God. We are love. We are love. We are all the love of God. Beauty surrounds me, falling at my feet as I hear the calling of the Holy One in me. We are home. We are home. We are all the wholeness of God. We are strength. We are strength. We are all the strength of God. Beauty surrounds me, falling at We are one in God. We are one in God. We are. Still not working.
Am I on now? Now I'm on. There we go. And now it's time for the God Awareness Place, 3 minutes of silent meditation. And after the 3 minutes, Carrie will bring us out with her music, and she'll go right into her song. So I'll ring the gong to take us in.
I'm on a journey things every day. So many mysteries along my way. Sometimes there's magic, connection so real, a greater story to be revealed. Tell me your journey, tell me what's on your heart. What are you longing for? And why do we feel apart? We need to listen to the voice deep inside, the one that will guide us, our soul, not our pride. We are a part of something so much greater than each tiny part. We are all so sewn together. One life, one breath, one heart. As we remember, there's only one of us here, safe in a sea of love, no longer driven by fear. Into divinity, as the path becomes clear. Create a better world. The message is clear. We are a part of something so much greater than each tiny part. We are all so sewn together. One life, one breath, one heart. We are a part of something so much greater than each tiny part. We are all so sewn together. One life, one breath, one heart. One life, one breath, one heart.
That's beautiful. Thank you. That song tells the entire story of the month. It's really lovely. Because like last week, we talked about my story. What is my story? What is your individual story? And my story is made up of a larger story, our story, and around that are other stories, and then there's the story, which is what you were talking about, the whole story, right? The whole month, storytelling, is a takeoff or is inspired by a book called The Crack in the Cosmic Egg by Joseph Chilton Pearce, and then adapted by Richard Rohr. And so I'm finding a lot of parallels in that, in how we work through our Science of Mind teaching, how we use our Science of Mind teaching to help us move ourselves through a more joyous experience of my individual story, your individual story. And sometimes that means we have to break away from our story, which includes hearing other stories, which is why I read a little bit about Thurman's experience as he cruised sailed down the coast of Africa, and then getting into the divine story, which is what we'll talk about in the final week of the month. But the problem that happens sometimes with our story is we can get so trapped into our story. So I wanted to talk about right-sizing our story, that sense of belonging that we all have. And it's a powerful thing. Remember, we need the stories. Our stories are necessary. They're helpful for us to find our place, to find our meaning. They're what defines our cosmology, our place in the universe. Very important thing. And our story, as opposed to my individual story, our story is made up of multiple meanings. There's so many different aspects that makes up who we are. Our memberships in terms of our community, our family, where our neighborhood is. I mean, years ago, if you've been in LA for any length of time, we had our area codes expanded and moved and changed, and 213 was where it started out. Then the Valley got 818, and there were people that really, really wanted to stick with their 213. For some reason, being told you were in 818, now you got a whole new neighborhood. Now we got like 10 area codes. Who knows where you are anymore? And with cell phones, you might be on the East Coast and living on the West Coast and got an East Coast area code. It doesn't change. But the thing is, we get attached to these parts of our stories. We get attached to our religious beliefs and who we are, where we are, and what we're supposed to be about. Our gender, our race, our country, our nationality, waving our flags. And today, people are waving their colors. I got the Ram colors on, but right there's a little Bengal color right there. I got some orange on there as well. So I'm rooting for both teams because, as I said, it could be a Joe Mazing day or it could be a Ramalicious day. But this is part of what makes up our story. I'm from Los Angeles. I live in Los Angeles. I was born in Cincinnati. Where are you from? How does that work? How do those things play into your story? Think about how many different actions, how many different meanings, how many different places make up what is your own story. And which one is the most important? Which ones do you value the most? And if you know which ones are most important, if you know which ones you value the most, that can be your key to right-sizing your story, because if you put too much emphasis on those, too much source of pride or ownership of your story, too much identity to your story, it can limit your ability to move beyond it, to live a more full experience of life. This is not to discount it. It is extremely important. Richard Rohr tells us our story is the necessary training ground for belonging, attaching, trusting, and loving. Our story is important. How do you know where you belong? How do you get that sense of attachment if your family is not giving you the love that you truly need? If you can't depend upon your parents, your brother, your sister, your friends, your neighbors to give you that love that brings forth a wonderful experience of life. As social beings, we need all of those things. We live inside of our story. We live inside of these areas of shared meaning. It allows us to get a shortcut into life. Because of your story, you can walk into your grandmother's house and simply smell the sense of smell that comes to the house, and you know what's going to be on the table. And the food that you eat resonates back generations. It's your reference point. It sets up the lane markers for life. When people say stay in your lane, they're saying stay with your story. The bigger story, not your individual little things that you do for your individual small self. I'm talking about the bigger self. And all these things that we do to market for us, the flags, our logos. Man, logos are important. I mean, I love my Harley Davidson logo. I looked at my jacket, my motorcycle jacket the other day. I got a Harley logo over here. I got a wolf right here. I got a hog over on this side. I mean, all these different logos to tell me I'm riding on it, and it's got Harley right in front of me. I know it's a motorcycle, but I just love to have that energy around me. We have that all over the place. Our colors, these things give us a sense of consolation and security. And even a little bit of safety, to know where we are, to orient ourselves in the world, to the small self to my story, to your story. See, it gives us something to talk about, a way to communicate, a way to move forward in life. And as I said, that reference point, it's the still point of the turning world where you can step out from. But if it gets a little too crazy, you can step back in the boundaries of it and feel that sense of security again. And then, okay, you want to stretch your comfort zone. I'm going to step out again. But it's a little bit, but you can bring it along with you. This is what it's all about. The wonderful author John Edgar Wideman says that stories are told over time, and so they naturally accrue meaning. Yeah, accrue meaning. Now back to the grandmother thing. If you got a healthy family system, you can feel comfortable in that. You can start to feel very positive about your group. And that's a good thing, to feel positive about your group, to feel a sense of belonging, to have that attachment, to know that's the source of your love. But too positive to that, too much of it, you might get stuck. You might get stuck defending that story or glorifying that story. And if we look around at our world today, there's a lot of folks that are defending and glorifying their story a little bit. If we look at some of the religious movements of today, and the one thing about the Science of Mind that is so wonderful is whatever is your faith system, the Science of Mind was designed to allow that to be a deeper experience for you. But if you've gotten yourself down into a fundamental place where the belonging to the story, I am Baptist, I am Lutheran, I am LDS, whatever I might be, I am Muslim, I am Hindu. If you're just hooked into that story so much, you're so big into that you forget that the whole idea of it is to have an intimacy with God. So sometimes our story can block our farther experience of life itself. Sometimes our story can set up people as objects where they're just a thing. And if they become a thing, then you can put them on a boat and ship them across the ocean, as Howard Thurman showed us earlier today. If they become a thing, if they become a vehicle of something you can use to grow an economy, if they become an obstacle of getting in the way of your glory and your joy, then you can fight a war against them. This is what happens when we get too stuck to our story. It becomes limiting, defining us, but defining us with limits. And we live in a limitless universe. So do I want to be defined only by that? I can see it, I can experience, I can appreciate it, I can right-size it so that I can see beyond it. Because the lines around the story, if you draw your story out on a graph, I'd like to think that our story is, the circle around our story is dots, because there's space to get outside of it, to give it new meaning. Because see, that group egocentricity, that we just get that group think, ooh, all in. I'm all in. This is what I'm all about. But no. And it's so insidious. It waits on you, and it feeds into you, and it becomes who you are without you even knowing it. This is another reason why we want to look at it. We want to identify it, understand it, not get rid of it, not throw it away, but to right-size it and see it for what it really is. Dr. Holmes in The Science of Mind says that each individual carries around with him, her, and has written into his mentality many impressions which he never consciously thought of or experienced. See, this is what happens with our story. It's the lens, it's the ocean that we swim in. You know the story of the fish and the little young fish and the old fish. We tell it all the time. I love one of my favorite stories. Hey, how's the water? Water? What's that? Because they don't know. That's what happens if we don't understand and take the time to analyze, think about. That's what Science of Mind is all about. It's the science of the mind. It's to look at what's going on in your mind. How are you thinking? How are you using this thing called mind? Because your mental influence has real power. Not just power for yourself, but power outside yourself. There are no boundaries, even right now. even right now, looking at the screen, you're looking at your video screen. I want you to just look at my face. If you can only look at my face, you're amazing, because I know that just as you can look at my face, you can see a little bit of the screen that's back over my shoulder right over here. You can see the bowls and the gong that is back here behind me. Without me even pointing it out to you, you can see more than just my upper body. You can see down here to the platform probably as well. Let's see I can look at the picture and tell you. Almost, look, you see all the way down to there, all the way down to my knees just about. But I'm asking you to just look at my face. See, there are no boundaries to anything. We make up the boundaries. So there are no boundaries to our story. But if we get concretized around that, it can limit us and define us in different ways. Sympathetic vibrations allow that who we are to trickle out and for others to receive the suggestion. Don't believe it. Think about a crowd. Think about the energy in a crowd. You've been there. You felt it. Today there'll be some celebratory energy in the crowd, hopefully. But it can also turn dangerous in just a minute. Crowds can become very dangerous because there is this energy, this mental influence that is taking place. And too much attachment to the story can put us in that space. But we can grow out of it. We can right-size that puppy, and it's a tad easier to do that as we understand it. And one of the things that happens as we move forward in life is we begin to understand it a little bit better, because in that second half of life, which many of us have experienced, the crossover into the second half of life, and once we get into that second half of life, you're kind of like, hey, this is me, I don't have to be a hero anymore. I'm not trying to break any records or anything like that. I'm less involved in my ego. I'm being my real self. I'm going to get up in the morning. I don't need to put on makeup if makeup is your thing, or, I don't get to dress up. I'm just here. Take me as I am. Once we get to that space in our life, then we're a little bit easier for us to reframe our story. This is why I think that the value of elders is so important. I'd love to call folks that have gone even deeper into the second half of life, I like to call them wisdom keepers. Not old people, wisdom keepers. And there's a freedom with the wisdom keepers. They have suffered enough. They've seen it, been there, done that, got the t-shirt and burned it. They're like, I am done with this stuff, right? I'm not worried about this anymore. I am now renewed. I wake up every morning and I do what I want to do. Years ago, I was having a challenge when I was back in the broadcast field, and people would ask me, what do you do? And I'd tell them what I do, and I got just bothered with it. I could never get beyond being on TV. And somebody said, well, let me try something here. What do you do? And I'd say, well, I do the so-and-so, I do the weather on Channel 2. And they said, well, ask me what I do. I said, okay, what do you do? I do whatever I feel like when I get up in the morning. I said, wow, I had never thought that I could answer that question any other way. That's the first half of life where you're involved with conquering and making and finding your way in life. But once you find your way in life, it doesn't have to wait until the second half of life is not about age, it's about wisdom. And we can shift into that wisdom as we begin to right-size our story and realize that there is something beyond that we could actually answer the question in a different way. I'm going to do whatever it is I feel like doing today. Dr. Holmes says that no matter what the lips may be saying, the inner thought outspeaks them, and the unspoken word carries more weight than the spoken word. That's where I was living back in that day I was telling you about that example. I was living in that space where my lips may be saying something, but an inner thought was speaking out to them. Part of me wanted to say something different, but there was a story that I'd bought into that I was my job. Therefore, if you ask me what I do, I have to tell you I do my job. If you ask somebody else, what do? They may want to tell you that they do their job. But when they get a little bit later in life, they understand through experience that they can drop into the unspoken part that says there's something more within me that's seeking to be expressed by means of me. There's something deeper within me that I need to say and share about. And that experience of life and analyzing our experience and looking into experience. Again, I'm not saying this is something that has to happen by years. This is something that happens by awareness. As we become aware of the experience and then we drop into that unspoken space. The fellow that I was talking about, this story has been written about, Joseph Chilton Pearce, says that we live on experience. He doesn't even write. When he writes, he doesn't write about anything he hasn't experienced. And sometimes our experiences are so tied to our story that we can't see beyond it. I told you about some of the evidentials I was reading about in The Inner Light, formerly called The Aladdin's Lamp, that William Hornaday wrote. And he tells a really interesting tale of an evidential in there. It's a little long. Let me see if I can get this out real quick here. It's about a woman named Lucy Emmett. Now, Dr. Hornaday's in his office, and his assistant, Georgia, comes and says, Dr. Hornaday, there's someone here that needs to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, and she doesn't go to the church, but she wants to see you. Apparently, she was listening to the radio show last night. He did this radio show called This Thing Called Life. And so he says, okay, Georgia, are you all right? Yeah, I'm fine. It's just that, well, you'll see in a minute, but I got to tell you this. Now, spoiler alert, some of this may seem a little impolite. It's the way the story's written. I got to tell it the way it is. So she says, this is probably the ugliest woman I've ever seen in my life. But she wants to see you. Okay. He brings her to the office. Dr. Hornaday looks at her, and he says, he I'm so embarrassed to say this, but the only thing I saw when I saw this woman was teeth. Teeth, teeth, and more teeth, like they had been fired out of her mouth. Teeth, teeth, teeth. He's like, hello. And she goes, I need to speak to you. I heard your radio show last night, and you said there's an answer to every problem. I don't know that there is an answer to every problem, but there's something about your show that made me want to come and see you today. I was on my way out to the Arroyo Seco Bridge, and I was going to jump off. But then when I heard you say there's an answer to every problem, I want the answer to why I cannot get a date. He says, well, I'm going to make it short. He says, basically, he looks at her and goes, well, look at you. I mean, you don't, and he's not trying to say anything about her teeth, but what he notices is that she's dressed unshoveled, her hair is not in good space, she's holding herself in a really bad position, she's just not loving herself is what he sees in this person. She's just not loving herself. And she breaks down and she begins to cry. And as she's crying, she's got her hands over her face, and he looks and he says, you know, this is about perspective. She's bought into the story that you're supposed to look a certain way and be a certain way in our culture, right? That's the story part that she's locked into. And she's crying. And he looks and he says, oh my goodness, you have really wonderful hands. And he noticed when she looked up that she had extremely beautiful blue eyes. And then he noticed also that she had wonderful, smooth skin and a lovely cadence to her voice. And he said all these things to her, and she started to brighten up a little bit. And he said, what do you do? She works at a bank, and she works in the back, and apparently she's a Phi Beta Kappa. He says, where's your key? I don't wear it because I don't believe I should wear it. And he basically helps her to see that there was something bigger than her. There was something bigger than our story that she was carrying, that she needed to look a certain way and be a certain way. She changed herself up completely and began to affirm to herself that she was intelligent, that she was attractive, that she was strong, that she was a good worker, that she was a loyal employee, and she continued to work. She started to change her looks, and eventually met a guy who also saw the good in her and shifted her life because she was able to right-size that story and move beyond the story of where she was and who she was into something more. She grew out of her story. Sometimes right-sizing our story will allow us to grow out of that story, to move beyond it. See, if we make our story our whole enchilada, that's a challenge. Making the story the whole enchilada is why we have some of the culture wars and the identity wars we have today. I am a Republican. I am a Democrat. I cannot see anything beyond that. This is standing over here and this is standing over there. If we can break beyond those stories and right-size that stuff, if we can move beyond that sort of thing and use our shared symbols, use our shared songs, our shared sacred spaces, we can move to a place where we can give support and encouragement to one another. Richard Rohr says that the handy language of us versus them The handy language of us versus them lifts some burden from our private striving, and there is true comfort in being among our own. It's so easy, is what he's saying here. It's so easy to go to the us versus them. It makes life smooth. I don't have to change anything. I don't have to listen to that other person or try to move beyond my particular perspective because they are them and I am us, and that's okay, and I'm comfortable because I'm just here with my peeps. But if you stick there with your peeps, what about all the others? What about the larger group of peeps? See, sometimes it's good to relax our boundaries. And then when we begin to relax our boundaries, we can move into the true story, which is what was in Carrie's song today. The true story is that we begin to move toward center, to move toward our oneness. St. Augustine reminds us that love God is what we should do first. Love God and do what you will. If we can move to that space of the biggest story of all, which we'll talk about at the end of the week, we move toward oneness, then that puts us into a space of accepting others' stories, which is what we'll talk about a little bit next week. But it begins with taking a look at our story, the container of our life, the lane that we're walking in, and then beginning to move beyond it by right-sizing it. And so it is. So here's our affirmation for this morning. It's be on the screen in just a moment. You can read it along with me, and it says, our stories, sacred symbols, familiar spaces, and encouraging places remind me I am not alone as I step into the divine story. And with you here, I know that I am not alone as we step into the moment of revealing prayer. And so grateful to do this with you at this moment. Here's what I know for each and every one of us. That there is a divine power. I call it God, Spirit, infinite intelligence, and divine presence. I know it is here in every cell and fiber of my being, and I know what is true for me is true for each and every one of you. That there is this space of intelligence within us, radiating from our heart space out into the intellectual space of our mind to be utilized as the visionary experience of bringing into our good that which is most joyous and harmonious. Moving toward right action, following divine guidance, we are led and inspired into a space of expansion, into that which is our perfect yet to be. So I'm simply knowing that we have access, each and every one of us, to that divine presence that allows us to see and to know what is ours to do, to say, how to do it, how to say it, when to do it, and when to say it, and knowing that we're doing it now. So whatever it is that is calling forth on your heart, that is beating on your heart, that is tugging at your desire and saying, yes, bring me forth, by applying the principles of right thinking, by affirming your good, you too can shift your experience into that which provides more joy, more peace, more serenity, more pleasure, more life. Grateful for this truth, grateful for this knowledge, I now release this prayer of affirmation of our good into an infinite law which says, yes, I hear, I give. It is my pleasure to give, and so it is. Then we move into our ways of supporting our center, our spiritual community. This is the time we would, if you were here, we would be passing the basket around, and then we would say this words of affirmation, and it's our weekly affirmation that allows us to affirm our abundance. And it says, divine love is doing its perfect work here and now. Divine love harmonizes. Divine love adjusts. Divine love prospers. Divine love foresees everything and richly provides every good thing for CSL Simi Valley. Now, divine love is victorious. And here are your announcements for the week. And we'll have some wonderful background music from Carrie.
And so what I recognize in all the gifts being received is the ability to fuel the right sizing of so many stories. Grateful for all that is given, grateful for all that is received. And so it is.
We are all one. We are all connected. We are all one. We are all one. We are all one. We are all connected. We are all one. We are all one. Like the roots beneath the redwood trees, there's a web connecting you and me. It's always there, though our eyes can't see, weaving together all humanity. We are all one. We are all connected. We are all one. We are all one. We are all one. We are all connected. We are all one. We are all one. In the deepest heart of everyone, there is love enough to overcome. Joining together, we have just begun. The time of unity has finally come. We are all one. We are all connected. We are all one. We are all one. We are all one. We are all connected. We are all one. We are all one. When confusion makes it hard to grow, and the darkness comes and shakes our souls, we will remember blessings overflow. Standing strong within this truth we know. We are all one. We are all connected. We are all one. We are all one. We are all one. We are all connected. We are all one. We are all one. We are all one. We are all connected. We are all one. We are all one. We are all one. We are all connected. We are all one. We are all one. We are all one. We are all one.
Lovely, lovely. Yes, we are. Yes, we are. So another Sunday. My goodness. Next week, we're all here in person, so come on back. Those of you that are not ready to come back in person, we'll still be doing our streaming on Facebook, YouTube, and cslcme.org. Sundays are not our only day for doing things around here. Wednesday is getting really exciting. Darlene Bellis did a wonderful service this past Wednesday. It was a wow, your wonderful self, wondering with your wonderful self. And then we have Johannes coming up with poetry this week on Wednesday. 2 weeks we're going to have a drum circle. So Wednesday nights are a thing to get involved with. Get that midweek pick-me-up, spiritual pick-me-up with all the various activities we have going on our Wednesday nights. And some will be, the drum circle, of course, will be live. Poetry next week will be on Zoom. But we got different ways. You get the e-blast. If you're not getting the e-blast, send us an email, and we'll add you to the list so you can get the weekly update on what's going on here at the center, because all kinds of good stuff coming up. Still some time to get your B. Thompson nominations in for the B. Thompson Award. We're looking forward to giving away $10,000 to nonprofits in this, wherever they are, hopefully somewhere locally, but doesn't have to be local. And the board will decide where that money goes. But we need your nominations in order to make that decision. So please put your nominations in. We have 1 week, a little over 1 week, 2 weeks. 2 weeks left for that. February 20th is the deadline for that. All right, let's stand and do our, before we stand and do that, I want to also thank all the folks that helped to make this happen for us. We've had Ron is on stage, he's been taking care of that. Gregory's back on the booth doing some wonderful work. Thank you for getting all this working with the slides. We had a little challenge last week. It's all working. That's great. Dee is on the slides, running the slides. Of course, Carrie, our guest music director today, thank you so much for that. And Steve and Randy and John, and Lane with the backup sounds. Beautiful, beautiful. And John, thank you so much for doing Practitioner. Your story was great. I loved your prayer, by the way. It was really good. And if you have a prayer request, please go to the website, send us your prayer request, or call the office and leave a message, and we will make your treatment become a demonstration, or as the old guys would say, an evidential in your experience. Now let's do the closing benediction. And join me at home with saying this. And those of you that are here, I'm at home in the heart of God. My life is anchored in truth. I can never be separate. I live in the consciousness of peace. I release all fear. I am living love. All right. And here it is.
I release and I let go. I let the Spirit run my life. And my heart is open wide. Yes, I'm only for God. No more struggle, no more strife. With my faith I see the light. I am free in the Spirit. Yes, I'm only for God. I release and I let go. I let my spirit run my life. And my heart is open wide. Yes, I'm only for God. No more struggle, no more strife. With my faith I see the light. I am free in the Spirit. Yes, I'm only here for God. Oh. I let the love wash over me. 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 I let the truth 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 wash let the truth wash over